Studio had hosted some extraordinary moments over its run at the top of late-night ratings. Tonight carried a different charge entirely. Prince Harry sat across from Greg Gutfeld, and the studio atmosphere had shifted from its usual playful chaos into something more electric, more unpredictable. Greg opened warmly, called Harry's appearance genuinely brave, said coming on this particular show after this particular week took something he hadn't expected from a prince who'd spent years making different choices. Harry, cautiously composed, settled into what he assumed might be a neutral zone. A comedy show. Light. Manageable. He was wrong. Because Greg Gutfeld had spent years learning exactly how to deploy humor as precision instrument rather than blunt tool. Greg started with a joke. Light. Warm. The kind of thing he said to everyone. What Harry said in response made Greg's expression shift from amusement to something sharper. What Greg said after that, still funny, still completely himself, but building towards something that landed with the precision of a man who'd thought about these questions for years, would dominate media coverage by morning. Because sometimes the funniest moments reveal the deepest truths, and Prince Harry had no idea what he'd walked into. This is the interview that shocked everyone. Subscribe now, hit that notification bell, and let's see what happened. Studio carried its usual weeknight energy. 3 million viewers every night. The panel setup, the live audience that had made this show the highest-rated program in late-night television. Greg had built something genuinely unusual, a comedy show that actually made people laugh, which turned out to be rarer than expected in this format. Harry arrived with a reduced security presence, settling into the guest chair with visible caution. Prince Harry, welcome to Gutfeld. I want to say immediately, this is genuinely brave. After the week you've had, you walked through our door. That says something. I appreciate that, Greg. I believe in engaging across different audiences. Engaging across different audiences. That's either admirable or you've run out of sympathetic ones. Could be both. Let's find out together. Let's start with the GOAT, Greg said, leaning forward with barely concealed delight. July 11th. Final day of your UK visit. Scotty's Summer Festival. A GOAT connected with your personal real estate during a yoga session. This happened. This is real. How does a trip that started with a historic Highgrove reunion end with a yoga GOAT incident? Harry stared at him. That's genuinely your first question. It's been extensively covered. By everyone. By us specifically. 3 separate segments, actually. I wanted to hear your personal account. I'm not going to discuss that. Fair enough. But I want you to know that in preparation for this interview, our team considered leading with the Buckingham Palace accommodation drama, the lawsuit collapse, and the divorce rumors. We went with the GOAT because it's funnier and also because it's real, which is the Venn diagram we operate in. Harry's jaw tightened. Can we move to something substantive? Everything I'm going to ask is substantive. The GOAT was warm-up. Now we're at the main event. The Buckingham Palace situation, Greg said, his tone shifting to something with genuine substance underneath the humor. Here's what's been reported. Your father offered you a room. You or your team didn't respond by the deadline. The offer was withdrawn. Your team blamed the palace. The palace blamed your team. Now it's become news. What actually happened there? There was a miscommunication between offices. Miscommunication. That's a generous word for what sources described as a public back and forth that turned a private family matter into a news story. Who was actually responsible for missing the deadline? Administrative coordination is complex. Administrative coordination isn't complex when it's your father offering you a room at his house. Most families handle this with a text message. Dad's offering the spare room. Yes or no? That's the coordination required. What actually happened? I won't detail private communications. Your team detailed them publicly, which is why we're discussing it. The detailing happened. I'm just asking you to clarify which version is accurate, yours or the palace's. Those versions don't agree. Now here's the part that's genuinely interesting, Greg continued. Despite all that accommodation drama, despite missing the deadline, despite the public back and forth, your father is now reportedly offering you a room at Buckingham Palace for September. He's extending another olive branch after you fumbled the first one. Why do you think he keeps doing that? Because family relationships matter to him. Family relationships matter to him even after you wrote a book about him. Even after public accusations on international television. Even after years of estrangement. He keeps extending olive branches. At what point does that generosity deserve some explicit acknowledgement rather than being received as expected? Harry shifted. Our relationship is evolving positively. Evolving positively is what you say when you want to avoid describing the specific dynamics. What has actually changed between you and your father that makes September potentially different from the Buckingham Palace drama of July? The Highgrove reunion, Greg continued, shifting smoothly. July 10th. The children meeting their grandfather. Genuinely significant. But here's what we know. This happened on July 10th, the last day of your kids being there. It was completely private. No photos, no details, and your team didn't confirm it was happening beforehand. Why all the secrecy around something you've apparently wanted for years? We protect our family's private moments. You've done Netflix documentaries about private moments. You've written a memoir about private moments. Private seems to mean different things at different times. What made this specific moment require maximum secrecy? The children's well-being required discretion. The children met their grandfather. That's wonderful. Why would their grandfather's identity require discretion? Unless there's something about the meeting itself that required management. Every family manages these transitions carefully. Transitions from what to what, specifically? 6 years ago, they were royal children. Now they're meeting their grandfather for the first time in years, as though he's a distant relative. What transition are we describing? Meghan, Greg said, his tone carrying genuine curiosity now. She came to the UK. The children came to the UK. You all went to Highgrove together, which is genuinely positive. But the initial reporting suggested she wasn't coming. Then she came. Then there were still questions about what she attended and what she didn't. What was her actual involvement in the July trip? Meghan was very much part of this visit. Part of it. What part specifically? The family meeting at Highgrove. That's one event. Were there others she attended? Public events? Private meetings? The Invictus Games countdown events. Harry hesitated. We approach public engagements selectively. Selective engagement. That's an interesting approach for a trip that was billed as a significant family homecoming. What made certain events appropriate for selective non-attendance? William, Greg said, moving to the most obviously charged topic. No contact during the entire visit. No meeting. No communication that's been publicly acknowledged. Sources say he and Kate were kept in the dark about the Highgrove reunion. What's actually happening with your brother? Our relationship is complicated. On a scale of 1 to I wrote a detailed book about him, including a physical altercation, and now we don't speak. Where does your current relationship sit? I'm not going to characterize it on a comedy show. You characterized it in a book with a significant marketing budget and global distribution. The characterization happened. I'm asking for the update. Harry grabbed his water. We're focused on forward progress. Forward progress in which direction? Toward each other, or away from each other, or horizontally avoiding contact. Which directional forward progress? That's not a helpful framing. It's a precise framing. You were in the same country. Your children saw their grandfather. Your brother is unreachable. That's a specific and striking geometric arrangement. Here's what I find genuinely fascinating, Greg said, leaning back. You came to the UK for what sources from your own team described as quite stressful. The accommodation drama was stressful. The coordination issues were stressful. Russell Myers, I'm quoting here, said what was billed as a big homecoming turned into a nightmare. These are people sympathetic to you describing the trip this way. What went wrong? Every complex trip has challenges. Complex trips have logistical challenges. Nightmares have something worse than logistics. What was the nightmare specifically? I disagree with that characterization. Your team's sympathizers provided it. I'm just asking you to clarify. If it wasn't a nightmare, what was it? It was meaningful and productive. Meaningful, productive, and stressful enough that sources close to you used words like nightmare and quite stressful. Both things can't be equally true. Which version is actually accurate? The Daily Mail case, Greg continued, shifting but maintaining his methodical approach. You lost. £50 million potentially. The judge found no evidence. We've discussed this on this show at length. What's your actual reckoning with that outcome? We disagree with the ruling. Disagreement noted. But here's what I keep returning to. You spent years pursuing this case. You described it as an accountability effort. The court said there was no evidence for the claims. What did that verdict mean to you personally, not legally, personally? The legal process was flawed. Flawed how? The judge was biased? The process was procedurally incorrect? What specific flaw produced a finding of no evidence? I'm not going to relitigate specifics here. You relitigated it for years in court. On this show, I'm asking for less than your legal team asked for. I'm just asking what went wrong. Harry said nothing. The silence is interesting. You have a lot to say about your family's treatment of you. You have considerably less to say about a legal case that cost you a fortune and produced nothing. The divorce rumors, Greg said, pivoting with practiced ease. They're persistent. They're specific. They've required formal denials. Your wife wasn't prominently present at several significant events during the July trip. What's your actual response to the ongoing speculation? Tabloid fabrication. Fabrication that generates formal denials from your team. I've covered enough public figures to know that confident, stable people don't need to issue statements confirming their own happiness. What specifically required the statement? False narratives spread without correction. They spread when there's material. What's the material? People who wish us harm generate material. From nothing? Sustained, specific speculation over an extended period? That specific kind of speculation usually attaches to something real. What is it attaching to? Let me try something different, Greg said. I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to answer as though the cameras weren't running. As though this was just two people having an honest conversation. Ready? Harry looked wary. That depends on the question. What do you actually want? Not for your foundation. Not for Invictus. Not for some systemic change framework. What do you, Harry, the person, actually want your life to look like 5 years from now? Silence stretched. That's what I thought. You can describe systemic change for 20 minutes. You can describe institutional failures for an hour. But what you want personally, what a happy version of your future looks like, you can't access it. My personal goals are private. Your personal grievances aren't, though. You've published them extensively. Why is the positive version of your future private, while the complaints are public? I want to say something about this show specifically, Harry said, his composure cracking. You've built an audience by treating my family as entertainment content. That's not journalism. That's exploitation. Greg's expression remained warm, but entirely unmoved. We've built an audience by discussing public figures making public choices and generating public consequences. That's not exploitation. That's commentary. Everything we've discussed tonight, you either caused directly or it was caused by the publicly documented choices of people around you. The Buckingham Palace drama was public. The lawsuit outcome was public. The GOAT was very public. The framing on this show is consistently hostile. The framing reflects documented reality. If documented reality looks hostile, that's an interesting observation about documented reality, not about our framing. You use humor to make serious situations seem trivial. We use humor to make serious situations accessible. There's a difference. And honestly, the GOAT situation wasn't made trivial by our coverage. It was inherently something. We just noticed. This entire experience has been exactly what I expected from this network, Harry said, standing up slightly. Then why come? Greg asked, genuinely curious. Seriously, if you expected this, you had that information before you arrived. What outcome were you actually hoping for by walking through that door? To speak directly to a different audience. About what, though? Because in 45 minutes, you haven't said anything specific about anything. You haven't explained the Buckingham Palace timeline. You haven't explained Meghan's travel during the trip. You haven't explained what went wrong with the lawsuit. You haven't explained William. What were you going to tell this different audience that you haven't actually told them? This format doesn't allow for genuine depth. This format allows for whatever depth you bring to it. Kat and Tyrus have said more revealing things in single sentences than you've said in almost an hour. The format isn't the limitation here. I won't continue sitting here being used as content, Harry said, grabbing his jacket. You are content, Greg said, entirely calm. You made yourself content. Books, documentaries, Oprah interview, Netflix series. You didn't accidentally become content. You chose to become content, extensively and lucratively. What you object to isn't being content. You object to content that isn't controlled by you. That's a different complaint. Harry moved toward the exit. You'll keep doing this show regardless of tonight. We'll keep doing this show as long as there are documented, interesting, publicly generated events to discuss. You've been remarkably consistent in generating those. We appreciate it, genuinely. History will decide who was right here. History will note that a prince came onto a comedy show couldn't answer specific questions about his own documented week, made a general complaint about the show's existence rather than disputing any specific factual claim, and then left. History will also note that in September, he's apparently going to Buckingham Palace, which raises interesting questions about the arc of this entire situation. We'll be discussing those questions, probably with jokes. Harry left. The studio door closed. Greg turned to his panel with that particular expression, amused, energized, entirely at ease. Well, the goat question really bothered him. Kat shook her head. He came prepared for the wrong interview entirely. He came prepared for questions he could deflect. What he got was questions he couldn't deflect plus jokes that made the inability to deflect more visible. That combination is harder to manage than simple hostility. Pyrrhus nodded. The silence on what he actually wants was the most revealing thing. Always is, Greg said. People who've built their identity around grievance can describe what wronged them indefinitely. What they want their life to look like, what the positive version is, they can't access it. Because the grievance has become the identity. Remove it, and there's nothing to replace it with. Here's what I want to be clear about, Greg said, addressing the camera directly. We called his appearance brave because it genuinely was. Coming onto this show after that specific week, Buckingham Palace drama, lawsuit loss, the whole situation, took something. Most people in his position would have booked somewhere safer. He paused. But bravery in showing up requires bravery in actually engaging. Showing up and deflecting everything, then complaining that the show uses you as content, isn't the brave version. The brave version is answering the questions. The accommodation timeline. The real state of his marriage. What went wrong in court? What he actually wants his life to look like. Those are brave answers. We didn't get any of them. He managed his characteristic shrug. We did get the goat reaction, which was actually pretty revealing. He'd rather discuss anything, including a lawsuit that cost £50 million, than discuss a goat hitting him during yoga. The hierarchy of discomfort there is genuinely informative. 3 million viewers, Greg continued. Every night. That number exists because people trust that what we say is accurate and that we find the right way to say it. Tonight, we asked accurate questions about documented events with jokes attached. The jokes landed because the situations were inherently there to be noticed. He looked at the camera. In September, he's reportedly going to Buckingham Palace. His father keeps extending olive branches despite everything. His brother remains completely separate from all of this. His wife's role in the July trip remains somewhat murky. His legal losses accumulate. His business ventures have a particular trajectory. He smiled. We'll be discussing all of it, because that's what we do. With humor attached, because humor is how we make things true rather than just correct. The footage aired that night. Fox News made no edits. The clips that spread captured the confrontation. The GOAT was warm-up. Now we're at the main event. Administrative coordination isn't complex when it's your father offering you a room at his house. You characterized it in a book with a significant marketing budget and global distribution. Forward progress in which direction? Toward, away, or horizontally avoiding contact? You can describe systemic change for 20 minutes, but what you want personally, you can't access it. You didn't accidentally become content. You chose to become content, extensively and lucratively. Harry's team released a statement calling the interview a hostile platform that used humor to disguise bad faith questioning. Greg addressed it the following night. Bad faith. Everything I asked was documented. The Buckingham Palace timeline is documented. The lawsuit outcome is documented. The GOAT is documented. I ask about documented events with jokes attached, because that's our format. The jokes were accurate, the questions were accurate. Bad faith would be fabrication. We don't fabricate. We note things that are already real. He added, 3 million viewers don't watch a show that makes things up. They watch because what we say is consistently accurate. That accuracy isn't going anywhere, regardless of who finds it inconvenient. 3 million viewers every night. The accommodation drama, the GOAT, the lawsuit, the brother, and he couldn't answer a single specific question about any of it. What does that tell you about what happens when grievance becomes the only identity someone has left? If you want more content that recognizes when jokes reveal what hostility couldn't, subscribe. Turn on notifications. Don't miss what matters. Drop a like. Share this with someone. More jokes, more accuracy. More of what years of late-night television teaches you about the difference between performing and being. Stay with us.